Today at shop.dap.com, we're going to be talking about misfires on vehicles with spark plug wires. Okay, so before we get into specifics on diagnosing misfires on this car, which has a 2-liter engine, which has spark plug wires as opposed to most VW and Audi models that are current, unlike this vehicle, would have this setup, which is an ignition coil. Each individual cylinder would have it. This vehicle has an ignition coil pack, which would be one place where all the ignition wires run to, and then each wire goes to each cylinder. So on these vehicles, this is going to be on this engine specifically, and then older model VWs, which would be the older VR6 engines, as well as the early 2 liters, and then obviously any earlier Audi would also have ignition coil ignition wires as well. So let's show you a little bit of detail about that. As we look under the hood here is our ignition coil right here. Each one of these wires is for each individual cylinder. In this vehicle, they are labeled with A, B, C, D on them to go to each of their cylinders, and they run underneath the intake manifold here and to each spark plug that's in the cylinder head. So what we would do to actually diagnose a misfire on these, oftentimes when you have a misfire, you can tell with a scan tool exactly what cylinder is misfiring, which you can either swap plug wires around. You need to remove one from one cylinder, find one that will reach to another cylinder, swap it. That will help you determine if the misfire moves from cylinder to cylinder by swapping spark plugs. That can be shown in that video talking about how to diagnose VW misfires. We show you how to use an OBDeleven scan tool to actually diagnose misfires. So we'll put a link to that here where you can check that out. The next thing you would do is, if we're looking to actually diagnose misfires on plug wires, an easy way to do that would be to spray this stuff down with water. Oftentimes what will happen is either the plug wires over time will deteriorate and have some cracks in them, or oftentimes the housing of the ignition coil can potentially end up with cracks over time, making that vulnerable to have the ignition spark arc outside of the system, which would eventually obviously give you not a strong spark to the spark plug, giving you a cylinder misfire in that circumstance. So what we would do is run the engine and then spray everything down, the wires and then the ignition coil, with water with a spray bottle, and then we're going to determine if we have a misfire if you see any arcing coming from there. So this is going to be our spray bottle right here, and we're just going to spray that down while the engine's running. Now, as you just spray kind of lightly on stuff, spray the wires. You can spray each individual wire and the plug as well. This again will help you determine where you have a misfire coming from. And what will happen is that the engine will likely start running rough if you indeed have some issues around the plug wires or the ignition coil. And generally it's going to be pretty obvious where you have something coming from. Now that we've followed our process for actually spraying all the plug wires and coil down, and this particular vehicle actually didn't misfire, but it is a great way to diagnose a misfire in that circumstance. And what you would often see would be actual sparking and arcing between all the different wires, or oftentimes again coming out of the actual coil pack. Now that's a great way to know that you definitely have an ignition coil problem. This particular vehicle actually still has a misfire, so it's likely that possibly internally inside one of the wires there's an issue. And again, swapping those wires from cylinder to cylinder is what's going to help us do that. So on this vehicle, because we have that going on and it has 90,000 miles, we're actually going to replace the plug wires as a preventative to ensure that we get that taken care of for relieving the misfire issues, as it does have new spark plugs already. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or comments about everything talked about in this video, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.